You are listening to The Overthinker's Guide to Joy, episode 30. This is the one we're going to talk all about habits, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's dive in. This is a podcast for overthinkers, overdoers, and overachievers who are tired of feeling over-anxious and just want to feel better. I'm your host, certified life coach, Jackie DeGranis. Hey there, and welcome back. So for those of you who know me and have worked with me and or have been listening to this podcast, you know that my foundational work is all about healthy habits to keep you happy, healthy, and less stressed. And although my principles are founded upon my own experience, my own research, and my clients' success stories, there is a ton of literature and research done on the subject of habits. Habits at their best are simply healthy routines, processes, or regimens. Habits at their worst are unconscious, unwanted behaviors. And at the very extreme, both can be a result of addictive behavior. But for today's discussion, I'm not going into the world of addiction. I just want to talk about habits, the good ones and the bad ones, and what makes us successful at adopting them and what makes us struggle with maintaining them or giving them up. So today, when I first sat down to record this episode, I was thinking, does my audience really want to hear about habits again? Because I do talk about them a lot. And I spend a lot of time coaching on them. But I also spend a lot of time practicing them and studying them and refining them. And I realized that part of the success of developing good habits is to have constant reminders about them. And if I'm always learning new things about habits, I can only imagine that my audience would also want to learn new tricks and new tools as well. So look, habits have been the cornerstone for many psychological and sociological studies around the world for decades. And currently, two of the most talked about experts, gurus, best-selling authors on the subject of habits are B.J. Fogg, the Stanford researcher who wrote the New York Times bestseller Tiny Habits, and the expert James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits. Now, both of these authors, speakers, researchers focus on the importance of habits. And as evidenced by the title of their books, both believe that the way to ensure success of developing a new habit is by starting with very small baby steps. Now, I believe a set of daily habits is a good foundation for not just physical health, but also emotional health. And you'll hear me use the acronym HOME, doing your daily homework, as sort of the one that I use and recommend. And just to recap, the acronym of HOME stands for hydrate, observe your levels, meditation, exercise. And while by no means is this list meant to be exhaustive, and there's a lot more detail, which you can listen on my episodes 1 through 4, these are my basic 4. These are my non-negotiables. And everyone who works with me knows that these principles are the ones that I recommend as a baseline of good, healthy habits. What I've learned, and I've said this also before, is most people who start with me, maybe they have one of those things on the list. Maybe they're pretty good at adapting 2 or 3 pretty quickly. But what's always interesting is how there's always 1 or 2 things on the list of 4 that feels either very difficult to start or maintain as a daily habit. But here's the thing. Even adopting one of these habits can make a really dramatic shift in people's lives. I have clients who the only thing they do on that list of 4 is start drinking more water. And even that one can bring clarity and calmness and motivation to take on other good habits. But this episode is not to debate whether these are the best habits to adopt for optimal energy and stress reduction. This episode is to discuss the behavioral science of why we are successful or not when adopting good habits or trying to get rid of unwanted or bad ones. So when trying to adopt a good habit or give up a bad one, most people fail to do so in one of 2 ways, either by not getting started at all or by not being able to maintain it. So B.J. Fogg, the one who wrote Tiny Habits, postulates that this is not about willpower. He says the success or failure of adopting a new habit or relinquishing an old one comes down to three basic things: motivation, ability, and trigger. He believes that in order to have success, we must have all three of these elements to achieve it. So here is his classic example. Let's say you came home from the dentist and you have a cavity, and your dental hygienist says, or your dentist says, you might need to floss more, but you always forget to floss, or maybe you hate to floss. You'd prefer to have healthy teeth and a bright smile and not have another cavity. So that's your motivation. And you know that flossing will help all those things. But how do you make it a habit? Well, he says once you get home, oftentimes you just forget, or it just feels like too much work, or you don't even think about it until the next time you're in the dentist chair. Well, to help ensure your success, you need a trigger to remind you to do something. So you might want to keep the dental floss right next to your toothbrush or toothpaste. Another trigger would be to use a concept called stacking. This is where you've already got the habit in place and you just simply add to it. So you're already used to brushing your teeth. BJ Fogg would say, if you're already in the habit of brushing your teeth, then make the commitment to just flossing one tooth. It sounds silly. Who flosses one tooth, right? But the idea is that just getting in the habit of opening the dental floss, tearing off a piece, putting it in your mouth, flossing one tooth, goes to the next category, which is ability, because it's really easy to floss one tooth. And he says if you start doing that one day, you might floss two teeth on day two, and so on and so on. But the idea is just to create the habit of flossing one. So saying it in your head or out loud with this pattern. So after I brush my teeth, I floss one tooth. He goes on to do this with other behaviors he's wanted to change in his life. In his case, he wanted to get in better shape. So he started doing one push-up a day after brushing his teeth. So he would say, after I brush my teeth, I will do one push-up. And he said that he was confident he could do one push-up. And then once he started doing it, he felt successful. And so he started doing one every day, and quickly that progressed to two. And then it was 5, and then it was 10, and then it was 20, and then it was 50. But the point was, he always did his push-ups after he brushed his teeth. Same with the habit of flossing. So author James Clear, the one who wrote Atomic Habits, has his own take on motivation, ability, trigger. So he took those three categories and kind of expanded them and renamed them. And he puts them into 4 categories: cue, craving, response, reward. Cue is basically the same thing as trigger. I mean, what cues you to indulge in an unwanted habit? For some people, it might be like their sofa and television and late night snacking. They see their sofa and TV and they immediately crave cookies, ice cream, popcorn, or chips. So what James Clear says is the first thing you want to do to get rid of a bad habit is remove the cue. And if you can avoid buying things like late night snacking foods that create that habit, that would be best. But if you live in a family or a house where it's not possible because you maybe have roommates or kids or people who like those kinds of foods, then put them inside of something or make them more difficult to access. He even suggests things like put something in tinfoil, Tupperware, or place on a high shelf. With less visibility, with less accessibility, you're less likely to create the cue, which leads to the craving, which leads to the response. So, can you find a substitute for a craving? Well, studies have been shown that when readily accessible, healthy snacks are available, most people will choose them. It has to do with ease and proximity. So he believes that success in creating or eliminating a new habit comes down to basically 2 things. Number 1, getting started with something tiny. This is the ability that BJ Fogg referred to. James Clear believes in applying a 2-minute rule or less. That is literally something that takes less than 2 minutes. Goes back to flossing one tooth or doing one push-up. But the other is to change your environment. So this is that trigger we were talking about. Now, the trigger might be physical or social. If you're triggered by something in your physical space, like if you literally cannot sit on your sofa and watch TV without snacking, then maybe you want to find a different habit from sitting on your sofa and watching TV. Maybe reading a book doesn't create that same snacking habit. Or maybe playing a game doesn't create that same snacking habit. In other words, change the trigger if you can't change the environment. Sometimes there's other things that trigger you in your physical space, like for smokers, if they have a favorite ashtray, or for candy eaters, leaving candy in a bowl for people in your office or on your coffee table. Maybe you need to remove that so you get out of the habit. Sometimes it's just having alcohol in your bar if you're finding yourself over drinking or wanting to break an alcohol habit in the evening. Again, get rid of the triggers when you can. But triggers can also be in your social environment. So if you surround yourself with people who like to eat junk food, binge watch TV, overdrink, or don't exercise, then find a tribe of people who will support you in your new goals. This is why joining a club, a team, a workout community like CrossFit, Peloton, SoulCycle, or a church, a temple, or other kind of group can be very helpful in rewiring your habits. This is why AA, Weight Watchers, and so many other like-minded communities have been so successful for decades. Because success is often found with support from other people with similar goals. So how can we apply these principles to my own recommended daily habits of home or homework? Well, let's go through the list. Like with hydration, I recommend drinking 8 glasses of water a day. But if you're not drinking any water, then 8 glasses may be a very tall order. So start with 1. First thing in the morning, when you walk into your kitchen, before your coffee or your tea or your breakfast or feeding your dog or your kids, just drink 1 glass of water first thing in the morning. That may do a lot of things. First of all, you'll feel better. We wake up very dehydrated, and a lot of times what we think is hunger or need for caffeine is actually just dehydration. So start there. 1 glass of water first thing in the morning, and then see if you can build on it. Maybe it gets easier. Maybe you start the habit of doing that before every meal, lunch, dinner, snack, maybe before bed. Before you know it, you'll be up to 4 glasses. And then maybe you'll develop a natural thirst and you'll get to 8. But just start with 1. Make it easy. Okay, the second one is observe your levels. So if you're not accustomed to focusing on what you're eating, and again, observe your levels just means, are you hungry or are you tired? And when was the last time you ate something healthy? And when was the last time you rested? So for the first one, when you're hungry or you think you're hungry, instead of grabbing sugar, caffeine, or highly processed foods like cookies, crackers, chips, what if you had 1 meal or snack a day that was a healthy protein with veggies? Maybe your afternoon snack becomes a handful of almonds and a piece of fruit and a glass of water. So just changing that habit to not eating junk food for a snack and eating a healthy snack changes your self-concept. And it's interesting how when we build that tiny habit, we start to want to do more and more of it. Same with if you're feeling tired. What if you started the habit of resting for 15 minutes during the day? Or if you don't have that ability, what if you went to bed 15 minutes earlier at night? And again, just a tiny little change could make a very big difference in you feeling fatigued. So let's move on to the M in home, meditation. So a lot of clients will tell me, I just can't meditate. I can't close my eyes. I don't have 20 minutes. It makes me anxious. It actually makes my anxiety worse. I don't know what to do, blah, 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 blah. So what about starting a meditation practice for 1 minute? Just closing your eyes for 60 seconds at the same time every day. And again, go back to that stacking goal. So where is it where it's easy for you to find 1 minute? So maybe I like to meditate when I first get out of bed. I brush my teeth, I feed my dog, and then I meditate. But maybe before you get out of bed, you take 1 minute sitting up, so you're not going back to sleep. You close your eyes and you meditate for 60 seconds. It becomes a habit. And it's small and it's doable. So when you want to create a habit, they say make it obvious, make it easy, make it attractive. When you want to break a habit, you want to make it invisible or hard, make it unattractive. When you start the tiny habits or atomic habits, James Clear says, you cast a vote for being that kind of person that you want to be. For example, when you make your bed every day, or even some days, or even once, you can then say, I'm a tidy person. I'm a person who makes their bed. Let's say you want to start a journal, or you want to start writing, or you want to start keeping a diary, or you just want to be somebody who writes. When you write one page, you cast your vote by being a writer. So you don't need to complete a novel to call yourself a writer. Just write one page. You get to change the narrative. So things like, I have a sweet tooth, I'm not athletic, I have no self-control, I'm bad with money. All of those things are keeping you from developing new good habits. You're holding yourself back with a label that either somebody once gave you or you once thought about yourself, but you don't stand a chance for success if you keep adopting that narrative. I used to have a friend who always referred to herself as an athlete because she loved sports. She was often suffering from mysterious ailments, asthma, allergies, chronic fatigue syndrome, so many different things. But no matter how sick or injured she never lost her identity as an athlete and was always happy when she was feeling well or even when she wasn't, to surf, to play, to ski, to go out and do something because she saw herself as an athlete. Now, I never saw myself as an athlete. I never played a sport until I was in my 30s. I didn't go to physical education for all of high school. And you might have heard my admission in an earlier podcast about me writing myself a note to get out of PE in high school and then smoking cigarettes in the parking lot with my friends. And it's funny how often people look at me sideways when they hear this because I really make a conscious effort now to be very healthy. But that was in the 1980s and I didn't know better. But after 20 years now of playing tennis and doing yoga and most recently riding my Peloton and playing pickleball, I will often hear other people say to me, oh, you're naturally athletic. And I want to laugh because I want to tell them, no, I smoked cigarettes in high school and didn't go to PE. But instead of correcting them or instead of correcting myself, I just simply say, yeah, I am. I'm athletic. And it's okay that I adopted that belief and that statement and that self-concept very late in my life. So I became someone who exercises. I became someone who likes sports. I became someone who is active. Yes, I've had my share of injuries and age-related conditions, but I still consider myself an athlete now. Now, we get to choose our own narrative by changing our habits. And we do that by doing one tiny habit at a time. And by changing our thoughts about ourselves, we get rid of those old labels that are limiting our success. And success begets success, which is why you need to start with one tiny habit. And when you're successful with that, you're more likely to do more and more. And here's the thing. You can start today. Identify one thing that you would like to change in your life, whether it's adopting a new habit or breaking an old one, and just make one tiny change today. Now, people assume because I write and I coach and I podcast on these issues that I'm just perfect, that I never eat sugar, that I never drink alcohol, that I never skip a day of exercise. And none of that is true. I'm human and I have my good days and my bad days. But I don't let one bad day or one bad choice or one, need to step out, kick out, or have some fun as failure. And I don't let it rewrite the narrative about myself. I am still an athlete. I am still a meditator. I am still a healthy eater. And sometimes I have Coca-Cola, and sometimes I have a drink, and sometimes I skip a day of exercise, and sometimes I sleep in, and sometimes I'm not perfect because I can't be perfect, because I was never perfect, and I don't aspire for perfection. As I always say, I aspire to make this all a practice, and that's what I teach my clients to do. We are not aiming for perfection. We are aiming for creating new habits and better practices. So make it easy, Make it simple. Make it fun. But most of all, praise yourself for your successes, even if it's one tooth, one push-up, one night of not late night snacking, one less drink, 1 minute of meditation, one glass of water. All of those things are successful. All right, friends, that's what I have for you today. I look forward to talking to you next time. Have a great week, and bye for now. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Overthinker's Guide to Joy. If you're enjoying these episodes, please subscribe or follow this podcast so you can always be in the know when the next episode drops. If you would like to learn more about working with me as a coach, you can connect with me through my website at jackiedegrenis.com. That's JACKIEDECRINIS.com.